Hi everyone and welcome back. So if you've seen my vlog where I went to London to the Gosh Autumn Winter PR event, I mentioned that I had some difficulties on the way back. And I thought today we would talk about them. Now what I don't want is for this video to become a big rant video, because it's something that is very frustrating. And something that I seem to experience, at least part of it, quite a lot as a wheelchair user. But for at least some of what I'm going to tell you, it is actually people trying to be helpful and just not really knowing that what they're doing is actually harmful. So I thought I'd talk about touching people's wheelchairs as a general topic and use the two things that I experienced when I visited London as examples. So while a wheelchair is an object, it is also an extension of a person's body. If you lean on my wheelchair handles, I feel it, it moves my backrest. If you knock into my wheels, again, I feel it. And I think sometimes people have difficulty seeing a wheelchair, which is an object, as an extension of a person's body. And this may be where some of the difficulty lies. So something I experience quite a bit when I'm out using my wheelchair is members of the public who don't know me and don't know my conditions see me, perceive me to be struggling, and try to help. Usually this occurs when I'm trying to push myself up a ramp or a hill or an incline, and a lot of people, instead of asking first, take over and push my wheelchair with no indication to me that they're going to do so. So it'll be someone who's behind me or to the side of me but past what my peripheral vision can see, will suddenly start pushing my wheelchair. Now on the face of it, it may seem that this is a really kind, generous thing to do and really helpful. And there's more than two, but for me there are two reasons why actually this is really unhelpful. The first thing is that it does take away my independence. If someone comes and does something for me without having asked me if I need any help or want any help, they're assuming that I can't do something and taking over. Now there are a lot of things that I can't do or I really struggle with and do need help with. So when there's something I can do, I really want to be able to do it for myself. And to have that taken away from me is actually quite difficult. And then there's the other side of it, in that it causes me physical pain and damage. If you imagine you're walking up to a road and a stranger behind you comes up, they think the road is clear, they grab your arm and they pull you across the road as you're walking up to the road, so they just kind of drag you along because they think it's safe to do. Now when that happens, they're going to be moving you faster than you were moving yourself, and it takes a while for your brain to tell your feet to quicken the pace and catch up. So they're sort of pulling your arm along. It can be quite scary because someone else is taking over your decision of how you're going to do something. And it can also give you a physically uncomfortable feeling. Now with my hypermobile Ehlers-Danlos syndrome, I have to make very thought out movements. So every movement that I do has to be within my comfortable range. Because my joints hyperextend, they can move further than most people's and also further than they should, and that can cause damage. So I have to make sure I stay within a very safe range of movement. When I'm pushing my wheelchair, I know exactly what my arms are doing. I know exactly how much force they need to put on the wheels to move at the speed I want to. But when someone comes up behind me and starts moving me, they do it quicker than I was doing, which means that my arm ends up being forced forward and it really hurts my shoulder. Thankfully, it's not caused a subluxation yet, but my concern is that it will in the future. It has jarred my shoulder on every occasion that someone has done this, and because of being moved at a pace that wasn't suitable for me and without my knowledge so my brain could adjust what I'm doing, I've ended up in a lot of pain, and I've had to kind of somehow get home before the pain gets too bad, so I've had to cut trips short. Now, I appreciate that no one does this in any way other than to try and be helpful, but I think it's really important to let people know that actually, while they're meaning to be helpful, they may actually be causing someone more problems. You can't look at someone in a wheelchair and know why they need that mobility device. So to make an assumption on what someone does or doesn't need or can or can't do is not only taking away some of their independence and their freedom to choose to accept or not accept help, but it could potentially, depending on that person's condition, which you don't know just by looking at them, put them in real risk. Now, this has happened to me, as I've said, many times. When I was in London, it occurred when I was getting myself onto a bus. I don't know if the woman thought I needed help getting onto the bus or I just wasn't doing it quick enough for her, but she decided to help me by pushing me up the ramp, and I ended up having to click my shoulder back into place. It didn't fully subluxate, but it definitely, something came out of line somewhere. And then I had to get myself from the bus to Euston Station, and then from the train station to home, which isn't an easy task in itself anyway, but when your shoulder is getting worse and worse and worse in terms of pain, and you're worried that it is going to subluxate as you push yourself, that's really scary. And it was also dark. I was having to get myself home in the dark. So she actually made, although she was trying to help me, she made life very, very difficult for me. It was the first time I haven't thanked someone when they have taken over without asking. And I felt that was a little bit of a win for me, because I've been brought up to be very polite, almost to the point of being over polite and thanking people for things that have actually hurt me. But I haven't yet had the confidence to say to someone, I really appreciate you were trying to help, but actually with my condition you've hurt me, you've made it more difficult for me. Please, please, if you want to assist a wheelchair user or any other disabled person, just ask them first rather than taking over. Now, the other thing that happened when I was in London, I have to say, was absolutely terrifying. I was waiting to cross a road, and the drop curb was quite deep and there wasn't very much room on the pavement for me to be, because it was right by a cafe that had chairs and tables out. So I was close to the edge of the drop curb. A man came past with a big massive suitcase, barged into me and knocked one of my front caster wheels off the edge of the drop curb. And I very nearly ended up going forward and into the road as a result. Now, this is part of a bigger problem where people don't seem to give wheelchair users, or certainly in my experience, there are a significant number of people who don't give wheelchair users personal space. I've been in lifts where people have leant on the back of my chair, and actually, not only is that invading my personal space, but with an active user wheelchair that has a different tipping point, it's quite dangerous. You could easily lean on my chair and tip me backwards. Thankfully I have an anti-tip, but ideally I'd like to take that off because it adds extra weight to my chair. But when people are leaning on the back of my chair, there is no way I'm going to take that anti-tip off, because while I would go flying backwards, I would stop at a certain point. Without the anti-tip, I would just go backwards and quite possibly hit my head on the side of a lift door or a pavement if I was out. And the number of times I've been, say, sitting in a lift, and I know lifts get very crowded and I do appreciate that, but recently someone came in with a walking stick, and the number of times they hit my chair with their walking stick because they were swinging it around, not like massively waving it over their head, but they didn't have it sat on the floor like I would with my crutches. They were holding it and it was definitely being moved. And while I appreciate that accidents happen, and some people, like I have depth perception issues, so I can't always judge the space someone else needs. But the thing is, if I bump into someone, or if I knock someone, or if I lean on someone, accidentally, I will apologise straight away. I don't think I've had one apology for someone knocking into my chair or leaning on the back of my chair or just kicking my chair when they've moved or something like that. It's just basic manners. So the point of this video really is that wheelchair users and other disabled people need a bit more respect. If you want to help them, please just ask. Most of the time, and I think for most people, the offer will be greatly appreciated. And that then gives us the choice to say, yes please, that would be really great, that would really help me, or no thanks, I've got this, which empowers us. Disabled people, whether they need a guide dog, so the guide dog needs to have a place, whatever, wheelchair user, scooter user, or invisible disability, everyone, whether you're chronically ill, disabled or not, deserves personal space. You wouldn't walk into a lift and stand next to someone and lean on their shoulder. It's just not done. So why is it okay to lean on the back of a wheelchair user's wheelchair? You're invading someone's space if that's what you're doing. Thankfully, I don't think anyone who's going to be watching this video is going to have done any of these things. If you have, and it's helping someone without asking permission, just know that most people will see that as trying to be really helpful. Just ask first next time. If you're leaning on people and knocking into people and not apologising, then seriously consider what you're doing. But I'm hoping more with this video that it raises awareness that these things happen, because a lot of people just don't realise the way that a lot of disabled people are treated. We're leaned on like pieces of furniture, and this is going slightly off track, but recently I was in Superdrug picking something up and I was waiting in the queue, someone moved away, they'd finished paying, it was my turn, and another customer looked me up and down with disgust and completely bypassed, I think the queue was only me, but completely passed in front of me to be served. One of the members of staff on the shop floor saw this, opened a till up specifically for me because she was so disgusted in what she'd seen happening. But it does happen. The number of times people just walk in front of me in a queue, and it's not because they haven't seen me. It's really not. Occasionally, if you're coming out of an aisle of something, you can accidentally knock into people because you are lower, people can't see you, and that's okay. I take extra care because I know that can happen, and if someone can't see me, they can't kind of slow down, move out the way, they turn, I'm there, they nearly fall on my lap. So I see that as part of my responsibility to make sure I'm extra aware when I'm coming into spaces where previously I've been hidden because I'm lower down. But when it's obvious and you're queue jumping and things like that in front of a disabled person, and I can't stress this enough, it happens a lot to me, it's really not on. And it makes me feel like a second-class citizen a little bit. I mean, I would never consider myself a second-class citizen, but you get that kind of couple of seconds of feeling like someone else thinks you're less worthy because you're sitting down or because you've got a guide dog or whatever. And it's really not a nice feeling. And I have to say that while this does happen a lot to me, not the being pushed into the road thing, thankfully that has only happened once, but being leaned on and people pushing in front of me, things like that, they do happen quite a lot, certainly a lot more than they should, but it is a minority of people. Most people are very kind, very considerate, and if they do something that is unhelpful, it's actually because they're trying to be helpful, like the people who take over pushing my wheelchair when I don't need them to and don't know that they're going to. So that was a bit of a rambly video, really, but I hope it's been interesting. I have written a blog post today about how accessibility is different for everyone, and that kind of ties in with not being able to see the reason someone needs a wheelchair. So if you want to know more about my thoughts on how accessibility is different for everyone, then head over to my blog and I will have that post linked for you. Thank you very much for watching, and I will speak to you soon. Bye!